Imagine the beginning of a lovely weekend. When suddenly,
This is a CBS News special report. We are interrupting programming this evening.
A technological disaster. These are the words of the American president.
Nearly half of all GPS is out of service for an indefinite period.
the result of an exceptional solar storm widely underestimated by the authorities and the space agencies.
Gigantic holdups, planes nailed to the ground, sea traffic in panic.
Banking exchanges are interrupted. The New York Stock Exchange has had to close.
I think it's hard to imagine the world without GPS today. I really do.
What'll be left in the world of the future? Computing, telecoms? Without geolocation, there is nothing. All the added value is going to happen around localization.
Who would do without GPS today? Has anybody realized just how much it's taken over our lives? Who provides the signal? How do they do it? What does it cost? What are the conditions? GPS is in our cars, our smartphones, our tablets, our glasses, and what next? Is it providing directions or imposing them? Empowering us or spying on us? Let's take a look at the wonderful world of geolocation, or geoloc, with those who promote it, those who sell it, and also those who are worried about it.
It is a trap. And it is a trap, I think, that most people enter willingly. But it needs to be a trap that more people understand the implications of.
GPS today could still have been virtually unknown and still be the secret weapon of the US Air Force. Everything changed on the 1st of September 1983 on the coast of the Soviet Union.
Emergency detect. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband.
Korean Air 007, unreadable.
Two Soviet fighter aircraft launched a missile attack on a Boeing flight number KL-007, which crashed into the sea.
I'm coming before you tonight about the Korean airline massacre, the attack by the Soviet Union against 269 innocent men, women, and children aboard an unarmed Korean passenger plane. This crime against humanity must never be forgotten, here or throughout the world.
269 victims. But victims of what? Due to pilot error, the Boeing drifted into Soviet airspace. Due to a positioning error, the Russian air traffic controllers mistook the civilian Boeing for an American spy plane. The last serious diplomatic incident of the Cold War was caused by a lack of geolocation. So that such a disaster would never happen again, Reagan's America offered the whole world access to its GPS. It was a degraded signal, less accurate than the Army's, but it was free. At the time, not many people paid attention. Hardly anyone paid attention, but one or two individuals sensed something was happening and went into action. Two engineers, Gary Burrell and Min Kao, stuck their names together and founded Garmin, a company cobbled together in a Kansas garage that was to become the leader in the field. Initially, the signal was only accurate to within 50 meters. That was just fine for the high seas and the sky. Two markets took off.
There may have been an advantage of being a U.S. company developing around the GPS technology because, in fact, it was a science developed by the Department of Defense, the U.S. government. More than an advantage, I would say, it gave us confidence.
For 20 years, it was a honeymoon between men and GPS. Garmin sold 1 million receivers in 2000. 16 million today, with a profit of $2.5 billion. One navigator sold every second. America has taken the lead.
It's interesting, I think, how fast GPS has come along, and to the point that it was a very niche technology, then it was a very popular technology, and now it's a sometimes overlooked technology.
For the other major powers, geolocation was too critical a business and too lucrative a market to let the Americans be the only ones running it. The Chinese were the first to feel concerned.
Of course, in the past, we used the geolocation system of a great country, but that great country is free to take certain measures and even block access to the system if they wish. In short, we're under its control.
Engaged in a race against time, China rushed to deploy Baidu, the Chinese GPS. The Russians modernized their old GLONASS system, a copy of the American GPS. And the Europeans had been considering their own project for some time, Galileo.
Galileo will be like a mini constellation, representative of the future system.
Is it necessary to build a machine that our American friends are giving us? As a politician said, why buy the cow if the milk is free? That's putting it simply, but it's understandable.
On May the 2nd, 2000, just as the Europeans were about to launch Galileo, in a dramatic gesture, Bill Clinton abolished the degradation of civil GPS, which would then be as accurate as the military signal, accurate to within a few meters.
We came to the unanimous conclusion that not only was the national security capability of selectivity not being very effective, but we were holding back entire economic potential for GPS by maintaining this artificial degradation of civil GPS capability.
A coincidence, or was it to torpedo Galileo?
It just happened to be the same year that Galileo was building up momentum, but whether it was 2000, 2001, or 2002, I think you could have made the same argument that we were trying to torpedo something,
So when the Galileo idea first came up, the obvious question in the United States was, why does Europe want a separate independent strategic military system? Don't they like the one they're getting from the United States?
Today, we know very well GPS is well available to everyone, but nevertheless it remains a military system which, in case of crisis, can be denied.
The American plan backfired. If at the touch of a slider America could deliver its GPS signal for everyone's benefit, couldn't it push it back the other way whenever it felt like it? That was the thinking of even the most reluctant Europeans who went ahead with the Galileo project, in spite of the cost.
Galileo certainly costs a lot of money, and that means a lot of public money. It's around €1 billion a year, €2 per citizen. That's something you might question, but in my view, Europe cannot be left out of this.
But why does it cost so much?
GPS, or Global Positioning System, is a constellation system of 29 Earth-orbiting satellites.
29 sounds like a lot of satellites.
Why do you need so many?
It takes 24 satellites to provide global coverage.
GPS is child's play for users. It's taken NASA 30 years to develop it, and $30 billion of investment by the United States.
Cool. NASA's always doing amazing things.
While the battle between GPS systems rages among the stars, on Earth, suppliers of geolock applications are fighting their own commercial battles.
In 2 kilometers, turn right.
Since GPS is American, let's start with America. GPS is in our cars, so let's start with the world's #1 car-owning country. And first of all, we visit the Navtech Nokia Traffic Center in Chicago. From here, they can monitor all the major roads throughout North America, including Canada.
Cars that have navigation systems in them or location-based service capability in them have a GPS sensor in them. And the GPS sensor is able to communicate over a wireless network every few seconds its position. So using the GPS signals and their speed and direction from thousands or millions of inputs, we can actually see what traffic looks like on a segment of road.
Thus, without realizing it, motorists constantly pass on information through their smartphones and built-in GPS to the traffic center. The center can then sell them real-time road conditions through their navigation devices. Bingo!
We monitor feeds or communications from police, from the departments of transportation, to understand changes in regular flow due to accidents and other situations on the road network, because drivers want to know not only what speed they're going to be traveling, but if it's going to slow down, why is it going to slow down? How long is it going to slow down?
What motorist could do without traffic information which provides an illusion of escaping traffic jams? In the United States, 3.6 billion hours are lost every year through traffic jams, with 21 billion gallons of gasoline burned for nothing and almost 1% of gross domestic product gone up in smoke. Here, traffic flow is a daily nightmare, a national cause and a great business. But knowing all about traffic and how to get through it has even better days ahead. First, the theory.
One element is the index of the real world, how we think the world looks. The second is what we call activity data. People actually moving by subway, moving by car. And when you have movement against an index, you can, what we call smart data, you can actually then be predictive. You expect people to drive a certain speed on a road, and then you actually observe it. Behavior can change quite a bit when it rains or doesn't rain. And then you can actually be predictive. So you could get an alarm in the morning saying, hey, wake up 20 minutes earlier, it's raining, it's a Monday. Usually the commute to the airport will take 20 minutes more.
So you thought GPS was just input in your car. It's in your alarm clock, in your calendar. You thought it just showed you the way. Now it's taking the wheel.
If we look at a very sharp curve in the road and we monitor the speeds of cars coming into that curve, we can determine how far back, depending on your current speed, how far back you should be applying the brakes in order to ensure that you have a safe travel around that curve. And if you're not engaging your brakes at the appropriate point coming into the curve, the car could give you some sort of warning, or it could actually start to tap on the brakes itself.
We want a GPS that can advise us and also warn us. But do we want a GPS that monitors us, which makes money from our journeys, and maybe also informs on us?
There's a lot of data we collect on an anonymous basis. And we do not license that data individually to others, so it could be purposed for a different way. For example, selling the speed profile to the police. That's not something we would ever consider. We're interested in the statistical collective behavior.
How can we be sure? How many traffic centers are there in the world using my movement data? Under what jurisdiction? A protective one or a permissive one? And who might be using our GPS to keep an eye on our driving?
This is something that GPS is really bringing to the fore, not by virtue of the technology itself, but is bringing forward these questions of what is personal privacy. Where do the sphere of private life begin? Where does it end? What are the conditions under which one can penetrate that sphere? What is public? What is private?
The most popular navigation application at the moment, Waze, designed by a small innovative Israeli startup, is an app that users get for free. Google has just bought it for $1 billion. Why pay so much for a free app? Our travels must be worth their weight in gold.
Sla over 3 kilometer linksaf.
Yes, in gold. And even more if we consider that the GPS devices have to be loaded with maps, thousands of detailed, up-to-date maps. A huge market.
Language speaking, communicating complex concepts, and mapping are two things that only humans do. Animals don't do that.
So, it's very important for people to have fresh maps. And you might ask why that is. The reason is because as people rely more and more on the products and services that use these maps, and the real world changes dramatically. We make 2.7 million changes to the map every day, and people expect to get the right answers when they look for something.
Equipped Cars Drive Roads captures a 360-degree picture of the world. A 3D model of the real world.
New roads, new one-way systems, new bridges, new buildings. An error in a paper map is tolerable, but not in a GPS.
This is a revolution in map making. This is how hyper-accurate, hyper-detailed map collection gives rise to more powerful, innovative location experiences.
The solution? Numerize the roads, and while you're about it, do it in 3D.
You might ask why create this map in 3D and with all of this digital data. And by having a digital city model, it means it can be customized. You can customize it to your own needs. So in a drive application, we can take all of the clutter of the big buildings around you that you see out the windshield, and we can make that clutter go away and show you just the building that you're interested in. You have your own personalized view of the world, own map of the world.
GPS has rendered centuries of paper maps obsolete. Our GPS navigators require us to start all over again, to roam thousands of miles of roads on every continent. That means hundreds of operators with sophisticated capture vehicles providing millions of elements of digital data to be processed by hundreds more operators. Endless painstaking digital work. Designing maps is a gigantic project which is never finished. Who can afford it?
Where we're really going, and it may sound crazy, is that we want to rebuild the whole world in 3D.
So Google wants to have the whole world in its hands. But Nokia has bought the world's #1 digital cartographer, Navtech, for $8 billion. To own the map is to hold the keys to the navigation. And in this race, the top predators of digital intelligence are already battling it out.
If we take the big four, there are a few others, but the four major players, Google has a massive investment with Google Maps, etc. Apple almost botched the launch of its new line of products because they were so eager to have their own online mapping system. Microsoft has always had a mapping system which is pretty mature and good quality. You hear less about it, but it's pretty good, and it needed a huge investment. You have to realize that it's very expensive, which is why Apple messed up. And Nokia, almost on the brink of bankruptcy, some would say, with the little money they had left, made an emergency purchase. They buy this provider who's the leader in the field of cartography.
And the reason why we do this is because we believe every generation has a seminal map, has a map that stood for that generation. We want to build the map for the next generation. I do believe the commercial success will succeed.
All the operators are basically betting that in the future only one thing will count, the tools that show me where I am in the world. Everything will be based on the paradigm of where I am in the world.
In this war of geolocation, China seems to have trouble keeping up. With cities springing up like mushrooms and millions of migrants from the countryside flocking to them, the needs are enormous. Is this the El Dorado of the future for geolocation? China hopes so, but navigators are still expensive and the maps are non-existent. So for these new migrants, the city is a jungle.
At first, the city is completely foreign to them. They know nothing at all. They're totally lost. They can't even find a restaurant or a hotel. They don't know anybody either. But they have the desire to be part of the city. How many of them are there now in China? If you include medium-sized cities, there may be 85 million young people in the same situation. Now, I'm a native of the city. I was born here, and I know every corner. When they use a geolocation system, they become like me. They can go wherever they want without getting lost. So in terms of competition, since it's competition between me and them, we could say that Baidu makes us equal.
To connect to Baidu, the Chinese GPS, whatever the cost, is to possess the key to the city, giving you a bigger chance to make your mark. For motorists, it's worse. 600,000 kilometers of new roads in 5 years. No maps. 176 million new vehicles planned for 2020. In Beijing, the average speed on the ring roads is 10 kilometers an hour.
2 hours in traffic jams are 2 hours wasted. That is why we developers are considering all kinds of solutions, such as, for example, in 3 to 5 years, self-driving or semi-self-driving vehicles. This will require a very high degree of precision in combination with other technologies such as radar and laser systems. But in the end, a driver will only need to concentrate on driving for 10 minutes of the 2 hours he spends in the car.
Utopia? Faced with the overload of Chinese roads that looms, the government is pushing innovative companies to come up with made-in-China solutions, which means Baidu compatible. Here, on the day of the driving test, the holy grail for the modern Chinese, the examiner is replaced by a satellite navigator. Impartial and incorruptible, which can detect mistakes on the circuit from space. What could be a better advertisement for Baidu?
How can we conquer the Chinese market, and what are its specific characteristics? To attract more users to Baidu, we need to find suitable applications for our country corresponding to the lifestyle of the Chinese.
The US GPS has a 20-year advantage. It's urgent for China to impose their own equipment and services with innovative Baidu applications and make them popular. That income is needed to finance their space industry.
A navigation satellite put into orbit has a life of 8 years. Whether we use it or not, it is working. It's an investment of several billion for only 8 or 10 years' use. The return on that investment, which is financed by the Chinese government, comes from investments in commercial applications on the ground.
Anything goes to convert the people to geolocation, even geocaching. It's an imported game, but China encourages it. Every geocacher is another promoter for Baidu. How do you play? The treasure has an address. The aim is to find it. The only way is by GPS or Baidu if you're in China. But the one who hid the treasure has tried to make it as hard as possible, of course. The treasure, according to the rules, is just a box filled with worthless trinkets. The real buzz is the sensation that you're part of this geo world. GPS was originally a military tool. We forget that too often. The military does not. Behind the success story of civil GPS, what have weapons manufacturers, military commanders, and troops been doing with it? How has it changed methods of waging war?
The use of the GPS completely frees the fighter from concerns of positioning and navigation. He is then free to concentrate on other things, like the use of the weapon system or ammunition issues, and so his overall effectiveness in the field is improved.
A soldier may want to cross rivers or inflict a significant impact on those that travel along them, with only limited energy resources at his disposal. A missile on which a GPS is mounted will undergo extremely rapid acceleration and high speeds. Standard GPS will not function in these environments.
GPS receiver is in every single drone, whether that drone is armed with missiles or is just a surveillance drone. It is in the backpack of every US soldier, and particularly the special operations soldiers. They all have GPS. So this is everywhere in the US military now, and is a regular part of fighting war.
The US Army now admits that 80% of its operations could not be conducted without GPS, which is no problem since GPS belongs to the US.
But yes, I believe that our forces will become more and more dependent, if you will, upon GPS as we look forward to the future.
What about other armies? Friend or foe, they all depend on the only fully global signal available today. To what extent does America have us at her mercy?
We lose capabilities when we depend on technology, and we do not even realize how quickly we're losing the basic capabilities.
Since GPS has been incorporated in all missiles, shooting at the enemy has a new name: surgical strike.
In 1941, you would destroy entire cities to target factories. There was carpet bombing to destroy one factory.
GPS allows us to minimize collateral damage whenever we have to employ munitions in some kind of a conflict.
You considerably reduce the risk of collateral damage.
How to be sure? Doesn't a world of drones and remote-controlled bombs distance the combatants from the combat? GPS has changed the face of war to make it a faceless war. Hasn't what used to be the enemy become just a target?
Because they are used to dehumanizing what they are doing. Everything becomes a game. I mean, when you look at the way that the US military regularly hires people with video game expertise, there is the thinking that we won't need pilots soon, you know, airborne pilots. We will need video game experts. And so there is a sense where if we take a new technology and make it be like a game, it is that much more acceptable to people.
6, 5. We have ignition of the RS-68 main engine. 2, 1, 0.
By becoming a key technology of modern warfare, has GPS also become an ideal target? If its satellites and bases seem out of reach of a real attack, the signal is vulnerable. When it reaches Earth, it's less powerful than FM radio. Destroy the GPS, and you can ground sophisticated armies.
If you have a very, very big jammer, such as an antenna on a truck with a big power source, you can take out GPS over many, many square miles. However, if you have an antenna on a big truck, that's also a target, and that can be destroyed.
In fact, it's quite easy to jam GPS if you want to, so they've worked on that a lot. What can be done to make our systems more resistant to jamming? And to do that, we have to examine exactly how GPS works. How did the Americans design it, and what can we do to have a satisfactory degree of confidence in the performance of what we're supplying to our armed forces?
Le niveau de brouillage augmente là. Le niveau de brouillage commence à être très élevé. On n'a plus du tout de position sur le récepteur civil. Pour le récepteur militaire, tout est opérationnel, tout est nominal.
GPS is part of the vast array called electronic warfare, an invisible war that takes place in the ether. It's happening on the airwaves, but it's a war that today is absolutely fundamental, even if we can't see it.
This secret war even has a name, Nav War or Navigation War. Its purpose, to maintain dominance on the battlefield. What is more dominant than space? The Americans have a very simple formula for this. If you jam me, I'll kill you.
Pre-pass, SVN 41. Checklist 1-8, step 4. Listen up for pre-pass. Going active now, SVN.
In this top secret base in the Colorado desert, they make sure that their constellation is working properly. There are 30 satellites. If one of them has a nanoseconds error, that means a meter less precision on the ground.
But that's one of the reasons why we are so vigilant here at Schriever Air Force Base. That constant vigilance, our 24-hour-a-day monitoring of the GPS signal, is what we take a lot of pride in, to make sure that it is always as strong and always as accurate as possible.
But we still keep the military in control. We don't give GPS control stations to NASA or National Science Foundation. We keep the control and we use it for targeting, but then we allow all the technology to be used by everyone. And I think that was a smart move for propaganda, and it didn't do anything to hurt the US capabilities, because the US still could determine how the technology was used by things like drones and bombs.
GPS has changed the character of war. In agriculture, it's created a revolution. We're back in America once again, which has been the testing ground. In the Great Plains of the Midwest, you now have to farm with GPS or go out of business.
It's a little bit like when air conditioning came into the farm tractor cabs and people said, why don't you just open the window? Why does a farmer need air conditioning? Well, once a farmer has air conditioning, you never open a window again.
How do you steer straight with such giant agricultural machinery? How do you maintain your vigilance for days over such huge areas? How can you ride side by side for hours without having an accident? By not touching the wheel and letting GPS drive for you. There's no better salesman than a converted farmer.
Fields are rolling. They're not flat like a table. So when you're trying to plant, sometimes you've got a gap, sometimes the rows are too close, sometimes they even overlap. So you can waste seed or you can have not enough seed. The same way when you're spraying crop protection products, when you've got a sprayer going across the field, you don't want a gap where the weeds will come up, and you don't want to overlap because then you're wasting material.
For $800 a year, your farm machine supplier will provide you with a GPS guidance system calibrated to 2 centimeters accuracy.
And agriculture now is a global business, and you don't have to be hugely better than your competition in South America or China or South Africa. You have to be just a little bit better to be the winner. And so that's what we strive for in our operation. We try to be as absolutely efficient and productive as possible in a high volume, low margin business.
7 billion humans to feed. At the Chicago Exchange, financiers speculate on cereals and speculate on land. But the big machine manufacturers have found the magic formula to win over their farmers: precision agriculture.
I have employees now that when the GPS doesn't work, they don't know how to steer a tractor. Me growing up, I always, when we worked in the field, everything we were driving. Now, operators, if the GPS doesn't work, they just stop, which I guess is good and bad, but that's life now. Everybody needs their GPS.
What we're doing in agriculture where I live is we're collecting more and more data. So I'm working with a system now for planting this spring where we will actually compile 20 layers of data. Soil moisture, soil fertility, and all the types of fertility that I have. The seed, the soil type, and on and on and on. So I will know every 3 meters in my field what needs to be corrected, what's working, what I need to do different next year to make me a little more efficient in global agriculture. It's just like mining gold, because the data is worth gold.
Work order confirmed. Alert. Irrigation.
Geolocation is at the heart of a precision agriculture that proclaims loudly that it uses less pesticides, less fertilizer, less irrigation, but still uses a lot, always and everywhere. Without physical contact with the land, is the farmer staring at his screens still the boss in his farm? Or just a guest at the beautiful wedding of the big seed producers and the big machine manufacturers? Geolocation has come down from heaven and slipped into our daily lives. Discreetly, GPS is colonizing our privacy. And because we love what it gives us, we let it do so. What's your wife doing? Where are your employees? What's my daughter up to? GPS for our loved ones, or for the ones we want to keep an eye on? GPS for reassurance, or more worry? To punish, or educate? One day, GPS slipped into our smartphones. That day was a revolution, because not only could it tell us where we were, but it could let the whole world know as well.
My daughter spent the last 2 weeks in France, and I could see where her Apple iPad was, and I could see when it was in Paris, and I can see when it was in Marseille, and I can see when it was in Provence. This was very reassuring to me. Of course, the tracking system was there also with her permission, so it was a mutual and consensual process. The problem happens when it's not consensual.
The new generations of Chinese, like me, are part of the first generation of only children. When I am far away, my parents at home can open their laptop and see where that little blue dot is. That represents me. My mother has said, for her, that blue dot is not just a dot. It's her only child. When she sees my travels, it interests her and it reassures her. Sometimes she calls me and says, "So you're on the port of Shanghai?" I find it strange. How does she know? It's because she sees my little blue dot on the screen.
For a person to even consider they're not being tracked, they shouldn't have a mobile phone. For someone to be very careful, they'd have to disconnect all applications using location. If you have that level of paranoia, and virtually nobody has, you will only be traceable by the telephone operator. For the bulk of the population, the problem is that people are not necessarily aware, and especially, this may be your question, for many services, we often want them because many of those things are very useful for us. I'm glad to have Google Maps so I can know where I am, and with many services, it's give and take. I can't expect to both be not tracked and have the benefits of geolocation.
Luckily, the purveyors of GPS have more tricks up their sleeves. There are applications that track you, but there are others that let you be the tracker. On all download platforms, so-called citizens' geolocation apps are on the increase, offering help for the disabled, for instance, or tourists or transport users. In Germany, the city of Dormagen offers its fellow citizens a free download, developed by an innovative startup.
Der Bürgerbemängelmelder ist gerade eine neue Meldung eingegangen, und zwar die 7779.
This is a new channel. Before everything was dusty and archaic, the citizen had to write a letter stating his problem. It was out of touch with the spirit of our time. People don't have time for those statements these days. They didn't have the chance we are offering citizens now, to directly contact their municipality day and night.
So where's the line between geolocation and geosurveillance? Neighborliness and espionage.
That means that messages like, "My neighbor is very noisy," or "My neighbor's garden gnome is too ugly," do not appear. We refuse them because they do not address problems for which the municipality is responsible. This is not what we want. We do not want to become a platform for accusations.
Tomorrow there's a demonstration.
We are the 99%!
Here's a piece of advice. Leave your phone at home or switch off your GPS.
When you go to a demonstration, if you're a hardcore militant, you'll arrive right at the beginning and see the whole thing through. That's interesting. If you're a dictator, you'd like to know whether the guy, fine, he's an enemy, but among your enemies, is he a leader or just a follower? Geolocation can tell you if the person was just hanging around the periphery or if they were really involved, in there right at the beginning. Or maybe arrived 2 hours earlier, which means they must be an organizer. Or arrived 2 hours early, stayed for the whole thing, and had a way of moving around during the demonstration, which showed that they must be a marshal for one of the sections of the demonstration.
The technology is not good or evil by itself. It depends on what kind of society we want to have and what choices we want to make about how we're going to use that technology.
You walk into a town, in a city that you know or you don't know. Your glasses or your smartphone tell you to avoid such and such a crossroad. It may be because you're driving, or you're on a bike, or it's dangerous, or unsuitable, or there's traffic. You can also say, avoid this intersection because there are many people who are robbed at this intersection. Many people have been attacked. So there's a tremendous number of uses that we can sell because we know where people are and because we have information about what happened there. We cross-reference it with a number of police incidents, the number of hospital incidents. We can say to someone in your neighborhood, we can show you directly, this street is in red, this street is in blue.
Danger, fear, and GPS go hand in hand. It's even the daily business of geolocation to save the unwary adventurers from around the world. Now that GPS is distributed free, there have never been so many landlubbers on the high seas, climbers in flip-flops, or sandboxed Tuaregs. Designed for rescuers, explorers, and isolated workers, the distress signals incorporated in the more sophisticated GPS devices are regularly set off by legions of Sunday adventurers, an inexhaustible market.
I can get lost anywhere I want to, and then I can get found again, and I don't have to worry about where I go. There's a feeling of both of comfort and security, as well as a feeling of adventure.
I move, therefore I am, is the credo of a new GPS-added human species. A community that records every movement. A generation addicted to anticipating through geolocation. Perhaps tomorrow, everything will be like that.
You know, I know many cyclists who wouldn't even go for a ride if they had forgotten their GPS. You know, it's no point. Why even go? Because I don't have my GPS to tell me what I did. You know, my ride was valid because I can show you on the computer now. So that's so much of where it becomes that need and that desire.
Never without my GPS. The ideal man that no navigator manufacturer would have dared imagine. Not just a customer, a sandwich man.
You can ride the same course that I ride, and you can record your data. I ride that same course, and then 3 days from now, we can compare and see which one of us won. We don't even have to be in the same place at the same time.
A free hour? Want to meet up? Leave it to chance and the GPS. The GPS can also locate all chocolate lovers near you, or all those who speak Italian, or those with cardiac problems, or all fox terrier breeders. If you don't like leaving things to chance, the best dating apps, there are dozens of them, give you a few seconds to fill in the profile of your unknown prospect. Facebook, photo, preferences. Sometimes it works better that way. GPS has conquered all continents. It improves our flirtations, our journeys, our efficiency, our wars. But then, the GPS was seduced by something that changed its life. Big data. Super powerful computers capable of making relevant links between all our personal data and our real-time position.
People shouldn't say there are two worlds, the ethereal world of marketing and the real world in which they are being careful. Once we have geodata, unfortunately, the two will mix, because we have to admit that anonymity becomes virtually impossible to enforce. So let's be very clear. If someone is able to say, I have an individual, and that individual is moving around in this way, and I know the person's movements over a reasonable period, now what I call a reasonable period is, say, a few days, okay, quite clearly, from a statistical point of view, we will have enough information to know who that person is. We would use statistical analysis techniques on huge volumes of data. It's called the big data movement. And we can analyze massive amounts of data because the travel log of a person for a week is certainly a lot of data. It means we have a position in space every second for a week, which is a huge amount of information. So that's the first step. And then we make cross-references. As you move around, you stop at places that are relatively significant, markers that indicate who you could be. That is to say, first you start by sleeping in a certain place at the beginning of the activity, so the place where you happen to be can give us an indication of where you live. So if I cross-reference that information with a phone book, that gives me the name of the person and the person's address. I have potentially a clue as to who it is. Then, after, we have to resolve the specifics of the place. In Paris, for instance, it will give me a building with 10 names.
That's it. You've been spotted.
And this person will go out. She'll go to a place, a school, for example, 5 minutes later, and then she takes the metro. She will go to La Défense and will go to a tower block. That tower block usually bears the name of a company. Now, according to you, how many people do you think live in her particular building, have children, and work in that company?
And as big data has also digested everything on Facebook, everything on Twitter and LinkedIn, all our store cards, subscriptions, etc., the marketer can continue spinning his web crammed with information.
What's really interesting for marketing is that these movements will give us so many clues. For example, we know that the person has children, that they don't have a car, we know where the person works, and so we can begin to make statistical inferences. That is to say, it means that I can begin to imagine that this person must be a senior manager. I would start with what I have already learned about this individual. So, unfortunately, that means her name. Then probably her socio-cultural status, her sex life, her children, an idea of her consumption pattern. And by now I can say, if I want to sell her a car, or if I want to sell her cosmetics, I have something to work on.
Scary, sketchy road, phone loading slow, incoming call.
A great gift from America to the world, our GPS. Homo navigatus is heading for his apogee. Baidu will be available in 2020, Galileo in 2027 if all goes well. More than 100 satellites above our heads, faithfully following our movements, accurate to the millimeter. And more gifts to come. But gifts for whom?
Thank you. So this gives you an idea of the huge market and the huge potentiality for industries.
We've seen a few studies that show that benefit on an annual basis far exceeds the amount of money that we put into the GPS program every year.
We don't really try to predict what all the applications are going to be because we've been surprised for the last 2 decades and we're probably going to be surprised for the next 2 decades.
The real question in Europe is why we ask ourselves this kind of question at all. Ask a Chinese why he must create Baidu and he'll be completely amazed. He'll say, but listen, we do it because we have to do it. As many people say, the success of a navigation system depends on the richness of our imagination.
Ah, imagination. Concerning geolocation, it's boundless. Well-informed sources that we prefer not to reveal suggest that after the geolocation of the Earth, the Chinese are already imagining the same thing for our satellite, the Moon. A lunar GPS able to guide cute little robots to explore the treasure trove of rare and valuable minerals lying under the Moon's surface. The receivers are not yet available for sale.